Welcome. I'm Sid Maestre, Head of Developer Evangelism at Xero, and today I'm going to be showing you how to get started using Xero's Python SDK and a little bit of starter code that we've provided for you. So here I am at the Xero API GitHub repository, and inside of here is our xero-python-oauth2-starter app. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to either clone or download this repository. Before we do that, I should mention that we have a prerequisite that you're using Python 3.5 or higher. You can use Git to clone this, or you can just go ahead and download the repo. So I'm just going to do that right now. I'll download that, and while I'm downloading it, I'll scroll down to take a look at the steps to install this. So let's go ahead and open up our download folder and unzip that file. Cool, that's looking good. And I'm using Visual Studio Code, so you can use your own IDE, but that's what I'll be using for today. And got an empty window here. Let's go ahead and drag and drop our project files inside of there. Now I'll expand that. We've got lots of different files in here, including our requirements, which defines our dependencies. So to get started, we want to first open up a new terminal, and that puts us into the right directory. And that's actually step number one here. Step number two is to create a virtual environment. So I will copy that command, paste it there, and run it. You'll notice on the left side, it creates this virtual environment folder for us. The next thing we'll want to do is activate that virtual environment. And I'll go ahead and paste that in there. Okay, we've activated, and now the last step is to install our dependencies. For this starter project, we have a Flask session dependency and a Flask OAuth2 library dependency. This is to help us with our routes and managing OAuth2 with Flask, and also we're using, of course, the Xero Python SDK as a dependency. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there and run it. This will take a second while it downloads and installs. And when it's all done, it's going to mention that I'm running pip 0.9 or something like that, and that a newer version is available. I should upgrade to pip 20. Now there was a small breaking change with pip 20 in the last few weeks, and so I've actually brought my version of pip down to version 9 to avoid that issue. You'll be watching this video in the future, so I'm not sure which version you'll be running, but we did run into that little glitch there. So great, now we've got all of our dependencies installed. We're ready to go, but we need one more thing. We actually need our API keys. So where will we store these? Well, we can go to Xero to get those API keys, but we're going to store them in a file called config.py, which will have two variables defined in it, and then this will be loaded into our app for use. So I'm just going to go in here and say file, new file, and I'll call config.py. I'll hit save. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. Yep, I want to save it into the root of my starter project. And then I want to replace that with my two variables, client ID and client secret, and save that. So now we're ready to go get our API keys from Xero. So I'll head over to developer.xero.com. If I don't have a Xero user account, I can create one for free. It never expires, and it has a demo company attached to my user account. All you have to do is click on this green Getting Started button and follow the steps to go and sign up for Xero and get your free account. I've already got my account, I've already logged in, so the next step is to go to My Apps, so I can create my Xero app and get my client ID and secret. So I will say New App, and I'm going to call this my Python starter app. Let's call it test number 3. I'm going to give it a company name, a company URL, a privacy policy URL. I'm just putting in Xero. And then the redirect URI, this is actually pretty important that this matches. This is going to be running on localhost 5000, and there's a route defined called callback. And that is where Xero will redirect the user back to your local application that you're running locally so that you can complete the authentication flow. I'm going to agree to my terms and conditions and say create the app. And here we go. Cool. We've got this here. We've got our redirect URI. We have a client ID, but we don't have a secret. So I'm going to generate my secret. Now it's important, before I hit save, I have to copy this information. So I'm going to copy my client ID. I'm going to paste it here. So let's go ahead and paste it. And I'm going to go and copy my secret. And I'm going to paste that here as well. Paste that. I'll hit save. And then I'll come back and I'll save my secret inside of Xero. So now we're all good to go. Let's go back to our repo. We've got our keys, we've got it configured, and now it says let's take it for a spin. We need to make sure our environment's been activated. It has, but never be too sure. Whoops. I want to do that in the command terminal here. Go ahead and paste that in there. Sure, we're activated. And now let's go ahead and start our Flask application. So come here. Down in the terminal, I'll paste that and run it. Great, now we're running on localhost 5000. So I will go to my browser window and I'll say new, I'll say localhost 5000. And it shows me my home screen. Now I have a lot of different things I can do. I can go back to the home screen from the index. I can click login, which will kick off the OAuth flow. I can log out. I can try and get tenants. If I try to execute any of these commands before I have an actual OAuth token, it'll send me over to the OAuth flow. It'll detect that. So I'm just going to say login. Now this route will take me into authorize with Xero. I'm already logged into Xero, so I kind of skipped through that screen. I'm already logged in. You'll notice it's asking for access to different kinds of information, whether it's the contacts, the business transactions, projects, reports, and it also displays my user account information. I'm going to select the org, which is my demo company, and I'll say allow access. This is going to finish authorizing and then redirect me back to my local host. And now I have my access token. Now, along with your access token, you're going to need one other piece of information. You're going to need to know what tenants or organizations I've connected to. So an access token can be connected to more than one Xero organization or tenant. If you like to think of it this way, a tenant is equivalent to an organization. So every organization will have a unique tenant ID, and when you make an API call, you'll need to pass in that tenant ID in order to know which organization you're getting data from. But you'll have one access token, and it can be tied to one organization or multiple organizations. So which organizations am I connected to? Which tenants? Let's call the connections endpoint and get back a list of tenants. So I get back a list of tenants. Here's my tenant ID, and it tells me the tenant name and the tenant type. Now, in my sample app, I've actually called the organization endpoint, and I'm pulling back this extra data here. So that's actually not part of the connections endpoint. It's a little just a little extra code we added to pull back not just the tenant information, but also the organization endpoint information here as well. Now, I've got my tenant ID. I've got my access token. Let's go ahead and create a contact. So I'll click create contact, and it already has this contact. So let's go in here. And let's go ahead and update this. So here's our code. We talked about that configuration.py here that we're going to read our client ID and secret from. We then use those down here when we initiate our Xero client, and we set all these different values, including our scopes. And once we get our OAuth token, we've got a few routes defined here. We've got our index route that just dumps our access token. We have our tenants route. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to comment out this organization information, because honestly that's not really part of the identity API, which is what we're using right here to define and then go and get all of our connections, to get all of our tenant IDs. So I'll comment that out for now. And then creating a person, so foobar already exists, so I'll just create a contact called foobar123. And then I believe we've already created George Jetson before when we create multiple contacts, so I'll create George Jetson 123 and I'll save that. So now I need to quit out of my app and restart that. So now I'm gonna made my changes. I'm gonna restart my my Flask application. So there it is, it's running again. I'm gonna come back here, I'm gonna refresh. Since my tokens, yep, there is being stored, I'm going to go ahead and click on tenants, and there we go. That has removed all that organization information that I was injecting in there. This is what you get back from the tenant ID. You can see that it's an array, so if I connected it to another org, I'd get another tenant. We could try that right now if I log out and if I log back in. I'm going to choose a different org to connect to. I'll say allow access. And now I come back, and now I get two tenants returned when I call that endpoint. I'm going to click create contact. All right, foobar123 was created. I'm going to create multiple contacts. So George Jetson 123 was created, but then when I tried to create a second George Jetson 123, it actually throws back a validation error because contact names need to be unique. So we can't create the same contact with the same information twice. I'm going to get back invoices that are of a certain status. I found 4 invoices, and if I look for the status, we have draft. These are all my draft invoices. And if I scroll down into my code for invoices, I'm saying go and get my invoices. I'm passing in my Xero tenant ID, and I'm setting the status only get back ones with draft or submitted, and then I'm outputting that information. So as you can see, this app, Starter app, is a nice way to get your OAuth flow worked out, make a few API calls, get your access tokens, and sort of understand, how do you do a token refresh, how do you get your tenant IDs, how do you create a contact or get an invoice. Well, that's all I've got for you today. If you like this content, please leave a comment in the section below, and also subscribe, and let us know what else you'd like to see as far as videos and tutorials that we're creating for you here at Xero. Have a great day.